I really need to speak out. I am grateful to Frescont for this opportunity. The next thing you will learn will shock you, so be prepared. Well, growing up, I always felt like my life had this steady, predictable rhythm. I had my routines, my home, and the little things that made me feel safe. I clung to that sense of stability, not realizing how much I valued it, until one night when everything shifted. It wasn't some earth-shattering event, just a small disruption, but it was enough to set me on a path I never saw coming. That one moment would challenge everything I thought I knew about myself. It all began with a simple sound, the clatter of a trash bin tipping over in the middle of the night. The noise jolted me awake, and I was instantly irritated. This wasn't the first time it had happened. I assumed it was the stray dogs again. Annoying, sure, but I didn't think much of it. What I didn't know was that this minor annoyance would lead me to meet two people who would shake up my quiet life in ways I couldn't have imagined. Still half asleep, I grabbed a wooden club and shuffled toward the back door. This was the third time that week I'd been startled awake by those stupid trash cans. I was fed up. Cleaning up someone else's mess, or in this case, their pets, was getting old. I couldn't understand why people couldn't just keep their animals under control. Sure, I got that the dogs were probably scavenging for food because they were hungry, but that didn't make it any less frustrating. I cautiously opened the back gate, ready to scare off the usual culprits. But as I stepped closer to the overturned garbage, I froze. Two shadowy figures were standing near the mess, and they weren't dogs. My grip on the club tightened as the figures turned to face me. "Please, sir, we're just hungry," one of them said, their voice small but urgent. "We'll clean everything up, just don't hurt us." My heart sank. These weren't stray animals, they were kids. But they sure looked wild enough. I stepped closer, and in the dim light, I could make out their scruffy, dirt-streaked faces. They were dressed in oversized, tattered clothes, with baseball caps pulled low over their foreheads. The night was chilly, and I noticed both of them were shivering. "Did you two knock over my trash earlier this week?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. They exchanged nervous glances before one of them nodded. "Yeah," they admitted, almost defiantly. "You always throw out something like pizza or food. We're sorry, okay? We won't do it again. Just let us go, and we'll clean this up." This wasn't going to cut it. I grabbed their shirts, not hard, but firm enough to let them know I wasn't messing around, and led them into my backyard, under the glare of the security lights. Now that I could see them clearly, it was obvious how dirty and unkempt they were. I pointed toward the bathroom and gave a quick, no-nonsense command. "Get in there. Don't come out until I'm back." Once they were in, I went to grab some clean clothes, old sweatpants, sweatshirts, socks, and a couple of big, fluffy towels I still had from my ex-wife. When I came back, the bathroom window was open, and it was clear they'd been trying to escape. "You might like being filthy," I said, annoyed, "but I doubt a hot shower is going to hurt you. There's soap, shampoo, and fresh towels. Get cleaned up. These are clean clothes, put them on when you're done." The bigger one glared at me and snapped. "We don't like being dirty. We just don't have a nice shower like yours." They stared at me suspiciously, and the older one added with a growl. "You're not just going to stand there, are you? What, you think we're going to steal your toilet paper or something?" That comment stung, but before I could respond, the younger one chimed in. "What are you, some kind of creep? You into little girls or something?" I was stunned. It hadn't even occurred to me until now that, beneath all that grime, they were girls. I cleared my throat awkwardly. "I didn't realize you were. Look, just clean yourselves up, and I'll get you something to eat," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Come to the kitchen when you're done." I left them there and headed to the kitchen to figure out what I could pull together for a meal. Opening the fridge, I scanned the shelves and pulled out whatever I could find: cold fried chicken, half a bowl of potato salad, a tray of veggies, some pastrami, and dill pickles. I split the chicken onto 2 plates, 3 pieces each, added a hefty scoop of potato salad, and threw on some veggies with dip and a few pickles. Then I made pastrami sandwiches with Munster cheese, mayo, and mustard, adding a side of chips for good measure. As I finished plating, I heard the bathroom door creak open. There were hushed whispers outside the kitchen, and then they walked in. A minute later, two of the most beautiful girls I'd ever seen stood before me, clean and wide-eyed. They stepped into the room, and I finally got a good look at them. Both had long, jet-black hair that fell past their shoulders, smooth olive skin, and the brightest green almond-shaped eyes I'd ever seen. Their high cheekbones and cute, button noses gave them a striking, almost doll-like appearance. They couldn't have been older than 11 or 12, still very much in their early teens. What struck me as amusing was seeing them in N's clothes. N, my ex, was tall, and these girls were tiny. The sleeves and pant legs were rolled up so much they looked like they were playing dress-up, almost like tramps in a vaudeville act. "Go ahead and sit down," I said, motioning to the chairs at the kitchen table. "Do you want a Coca-Cola? Or I've got juice or milk." They both asked for milk, so I poured 2 tall glasses and set them in front of them. "My name's McKay North," I said, introducing myself. "What about you two? What are your names?" The older one spoke up first. "I'm Madison, short for Margaret. And this is Stokely." She glanced down at the spread of food before them. "Can we really eat all this?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You can have as much as you want," I replied. "If you're still hungry after, I've got more sandwiches. But I'm not cooking at 2 a.m. You'll have to wait until morning for that." "No, this is great. Thank you," Stokely said quietly, while Madison stared at me with wary eyes. "What do you want from us?" Madison asked suddenly, her tone suspicious. "We're not doing any dirty stuff, if that's what you're thinking." I couldn't help but laugh at how serious she sounded. "Neither am I said with a grin. "And trust me, if either of you had any plans to compromise my virtue, you'd be sorely disappointed." They didn't seem to catch my humor, but I pressed on. "Relax, I'm not into little girls." That comment made them bristle. Clearly, they didn't appreciate being called little girls, but they didn't argue. Instead, they started eating, and fast, like they hadn't had a proper meal in weeks. "Whoa, slow down," I said, watching them devour the food. "The chicken isn't going anywhere, it's not running off, and the potatoes were never fast to begin with." That earned me a pair of giggles, which lightened the mood. They slowed down a bit but kept eating like they were making up for lost time. "Where do you two live?" I asked after a moment. "There's an empty house at the end of the block," Madison said between bites. "We found a mattress and some blankets there, but we're scared someone might move in now that it's empty." "They will," I said honestly. "How about you sleep in a warm, clean bed tonight instead?" They both stopped chewing and looked at me with suspicion. "Not mine," I added quickly, laughing at their expressions. "I've got 3 extra bedrooms." "Well, technically they're mine too, but you get what I mean." Their nervous laughs told me they weren't sure if they could trust me yet. "We don't have any money," Stokely said hesitantly. "We can't pay you." "I didn't ask for money," I replied. "Did I say anything about payment? Then why are you doing this?" Madison pressed, her green eyes narrowing. "Why are you being so nice to us?" "Call me Matthew," I said. "Everyone does. And I'm not trying to be cute here, I'm just a decent guy. If you don't believe me, you can ask my mom." That got a faint smile out of both of them, and I made a mental note to try and get them to smile more often. "If I were in your shoes, I'd want someone to be kind to me," I added, shrugging. They seemed to think it over. Finally, Stokely spoke up. "Can I have some more chips?" "Help yourself," I said, pushing the bag toward them. They reached in and kept eating while working through their sandwiches. By the time I finished my own plate, they'd cleaned theirs completely, even the veggies. They must have been starving. I poured them another glass of milk, and they drank it down like it was the best thing they'd ever tasted. "All right, time for bed," I said, standing up. "Each of you has your own bathroom, too. There are toothbrushes, combs, aspirin, stomach medicine, toothpaste, and dental floss in the first aid kits. If you need anything else, just let me know." "Can we lock the doors?" Madison asked cautiously. "Yes," I said with a nod. "But if I knock, you've got to open the door within a reasonable amount of time." They exchanged a glance, and Madison's green eyes lit up with mischief. "He thinks we're going to steal something," she said to Stokely. "Don't worry, mister," Stokely chimed in. "We won't take anything. And it's okay if you don't trust us, We don't really trust you either. That made me laugh. Fair enough, I said. We've got mutual distrust. But don't worry, you'll learn soon enough that you can trust me. I rarely ever hurt beautiful girls. That comment brought another round of dazzling smiles from them. As they followed me down the hallway to their rooms, I heard the locks click after they went inside. It made me smile as I headed back to my own bed. Lying there, I couldn't stop my mind from wandering. What had happened to these girls? Why were they digging through my trash? Why were they alone? Where was their family? These questions kept me up for a while, but I decided I'd get some answers in the morning. The next day, as I was getting dressed, I heard the faint sound of floorboards creaking out in the hallway. I cracked my door open just enough to see them sneaking toward the living room. They had that look, the kind that said they were planning to bolt. I stepped into the hallway, and they froze in their tracks. "Girls, are you ready for breakfast?" I asked casually. They exchanged a quick glance. "Maybe we should just leave," Madison said cautiously. "You're not going to, lock us up or anything, are you?" Stokely asked, her tone hesitant. "You mean force you to stay?" I clarified. They nodded, eyes wary. "No," I said, shaking my head. "That's not how I do things. But I'd love for you to stick around for breakfast." They glanced at each other again, silently debating their next move. "Will you let us go after?" Stokely finally asked. "If that's what you want," I said, though I couldn't help but hope they'd choose to stay a little longer. "But I was hoping you'd spend the day with me. If you have somewhere else to be, that's okay too." Madison smirked. "Yeah, we've got to meet our stockbroker later." Her face lit up like a Christmas tree as she delivered the joke. "So, what's for breakfast? Or wait, what are you going to feed us?" She corrected herself with exaggerated mockery. I grinned at her sass. "Are you an English teacher or something?" "Actually, yes," I said. "I teach English literature at the university." "Cool," Stokely said, shrugging. "We don't go to school. Too busy, you know." "But you're staying for breakfast, right?" I asked, moving us back on track. "I was thinking waffles and bacon." "Sound good?" It did. So, we made our way to the kitchen. While I mixed the waffle batter, they rummaged through the cabinets and pulled out the waffle iron. Madison even helped me turn the bacon while I worked on grinding fresh coffee beans. "I'm kind of a syrup snob," I admitted. "And a coffee snob, too." When everything came together, we sat down with waffles, real maple syrup, and a plate piled high with 2 pounds of bacon. They horrified me by asking for flavored coffee creamer, but I begrudgingly let them have the vanilla one I kept around for or the Avida, as I jokingly called creamer fans. We devoured the bacon, and each of them managed to eat 3 waffles, drowning them in syrup. "Stick with me, girls, and in a week you'll be as fat as toads," I teased, grinning. They laughed, a genuine, carefree sound that might have been the best thing I'd heard in a long time. Afterward, they gulped down milk like hungry calves, leaving my pantry looking like it had survived a locust swarm. Restocking was definitely in my near future. Once we were finished, I poured us some coffee, and we moved to the living room. I decided it was time to get some answers. "So, tell me about Madison and Stokely," I said, leaning back in my chair. "What's going on with you two? Why are you digging through people's trash for food?" They hesitated at first but eventually began to share their story. It was heartbreaking. Their father had been a car mechanic who lost his job when they were young. That hit sent him into a downward spiral of drinking, and the drinking turned into abuse. Their mother finally had enough and divorced him, but after that, he disappeared from their lives completely. The economy in Detroit was crumbling, making it almost impossible to find steady work. Their mom did her best to support them by driving a taxi, but one night, she picked up the wrong passenger. He stabbed her for the little bit of money she had and left her to die. After their mom's death, the girls were placed in foster care, but the foster home turned out to be abusive. Unable to endure the mistreatment, they ran away. For the past 3 months, they'd been living on the streets, scraping by as best they could. Their last name was Steele, a fitting name, given their resilience, but they were constantly plagued by fears of freezing to death, being hurt, or worse. And of course, there was the endless worry about where their next meal would come from. When they finished their story, I sat there quietly, my heart heavy. Their experiences had shattered me. I couldn't stop wondering how many other kids were out there living the same nightmare, struggling to survive in a world that didn't seem to care about them. It was likely far more common than I'd ever realized. I wanted to help them, but I wasn't sure how. Could I? Would they even let me? And how would it work? It wasn't as if children's services would look kindly on a single man taking in 2 young girls. The idea seemed ludicrous, like something a predator might dream up, and I doubted anyone at social services would give it the green light. My thoughts were interrupted when Stokely spoke up. "Matthew, are you married?" "I was," I said. "But my ex thought I wasn't ambitious enough for her. She's a hotshot lawyer now, always traveling. There wasn't much room for a marriage in her life." "What a witch," Madison said bluntly. I couldn't help but laugh. "She's actually a good person," I said. "She didn't cheat or anything like that, and we're still on good terms. We both realized we shouldn't have gotten married in the first place. We were young and dumb, didn't know what we were doing." "How old are you?" Stokely asked, tilting her head curiously. "I'm 28, I replied. "What about you two?" "I'm 11, and she's 13, Stokely said, pointing to Madison. "What are you doing today?" she asked. Then, catching herself, she added, "What are we doing today?" I grinned at the correction. "We're going to talk," I said. "And I'm going to introduce you to someone." I walked over to the garage door and opened it. Instantly, a massive blur of fur came bounding into the house. He spotted our guests, and without hesitation, launched himself onto the sofa, sprawling across their laps and showering them with slobbery licks. "This is Gary," I said, smiling. "But I call him Grandma." The girls burst into giggles as the dog's big pink tongue continued its assault. At 130 pounds, they could barely move him. "Lie down, Grandma," I commanded. The dog reluctantly obeyed, settling across their legs like a furry blanket. "He's huge!" Stokely exclaimed, running her fingers through his brindled coat. "What kind of dog is he?" "He looks like a tiger." "He's a bull mastiff," I explained. "That's why his coat has that tiger-striped brindle pattern. He looks like he could bite our faces off," Madison said, eyeing him warily. "Yeah, he could," I admitted. "But he won't. He's gentle with my friends. He sees you here, being kind, so he loves you. Now, if you were a threat, that'd be a different story. But since you're not, he'll protect you from anyone who tries to hurt you, even me. If I yell at you, he wouldn't like it one bit." Stokely slid off the couch and wrapped her arms around the dog's thick neck as he licked her hand. "I love him," she said, beaming. "He's so wrinkly and cute." "Does he live in the garage?" she asked, scratching behind his ears. "No, he lives in the house," I replied. "He wasn't feeling well yesterday, so I put him outside for a bit to avoid any accidents." "What made him sick?" Stokely asked, wrinkling her nose. "He eats things he shouldn't, sticks, bugs, dead animals, you name it. But he seems fine now." "Gross," Madison chimed in, though she couldn't stop laughing as Grandma licked Stokely's face again. "Madison said he licked my face." She made a mock disgusted face, but her grin gave her away. "Yeah, he's a bit gross," I admitted, chuckling. "But he's my buddy, and if you let him, he'll be your buddy too. We should take him for a walk," she suggested. I grabbed his leash, and Madison eagerly took the lead. Or at least she tried to. Gary had other plans. He pulled her a few yards ahead of Stokely and me, practically dragging her along the sidewalk. She laughed the whole way, holding on tight. Meanwhile, Stokely slipped her small hand into mine. I looked down at her, and she smiled up at me with those big green eyes. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. "Of course, sweetheart," I replied. "I like holding hands with pretty girls." She blushed a little but didn't let go. We walked for a couple of miles. By the time we got back, Gary was panting and drooling like crazy. It was cold outside, but he didn't seem to care. Back at the house, we drank more coffee and spent the rest of the day talking. I finally worked up the courage to ask the girls if they'd let me help them. "What can you do?" Madison asked skeptically. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "But I could talk to Anne. She's a lawyer, not exactly the right kind for this situation, But maybe she'll have some ideas. Is this the same witch? Madison asked, raising an eyebrow. Madison, stop calling her that, I said, trying to stifle a laugh. She's not a witch. Do you trust me? The girls exchanged a look before Stokely nodded. Yeah, I guess. You've been really kind to us, Madison added. Okay then, let's call and see if she can come over. I think you'll like her, just give her a chance. And was busy but agreed to join us for dinner. When she walked in later that evening, it was impossible not to notice the impact she had on the girls. Anne was tall and striking, with fiery red hair that always seemed to catch the light. She didn't realize how beautiful she was, effortlessly stunning and magnetic. As soon as she stepped inside, she kissed me on the cheek until my toes curled and then gave each of the girls a warm hug. You've replaced me, haven't you? She teased, winking at them. No, Bree, I said with a grin. You're irreplaceable. She beamed at the compliment, clearly pleased. I took a moment to explain to the girls that Bree and I were still good friends. And we were. Our marriage hadn't worked, but our friendship did. Bree and I shared a casual, no-strings-attached relationship. We weren't in love the way married couples should be, but we did care about each other deeply. Occasionally, we'd spend a weekend together or even a whole week, and yes, sometimes things got physical. But neither of us wanted the pressure of a full-time commitment, and we'd come to terms with that a long time ago. So, who are your new girlfriends? Bree asked with a playful smile. I'm Madison, and this is Stokely, Madison said, her voice unusually soft. It was clear they were both a little dazzled by Bree's confidence. Nice to meet you, Bree replied warmly. You know this guy's dangerous, right? Not to us, Stokely said quickly. But maybe to someone who messes with him. He has a club and a really big dog. And laughed, and nudged Gary with her boot. He grumbled in his sleep but didn't bother lifting his head. Hey, big guy, she said, kneeling down to scratch behind his ears. Miss me? Gary rolled his eyes but stayed sprawled out on the floor, clearly too tired to move. So, what's going on, Matthew? Bree asked, straightening up. What did you need to talk about? Not that I mind being here for dinner, your cooking's always worth the trip. He's a great cook, Madison chimed in. We've never had anything like this before. Lamb chops, huh? Sounds like I'm in for a treat, Bree said. Then, turning back to me, she asked again. But seriously, what's the big deal? During dinner, I laid it all out. Bree, we need your help, I said. We don't know anything about legal stuff, and these girls need someone who does. Their dad might still be alive, but no one knows where he is. He abandoned them years ago, and their mom. I hesitated, glancing at the girls before continuing. She was murdered. They ended up in foster care, but the system failed them. The guy they were placed with was abusive, so they ran away. They'd been living on the streets ever since. Anne's expression softened as she looked at the girls. Oh, sweetheart, she said quietly. I'm so sorry. You've been through so much. I explained to Anne how I'd found the girls digging through my trash and how I couldn't bear the thought of them going back to that life. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. You want them, don't you? She finally said, exhaling sharply. What? I asked, caught off guard. You've always wanted kids, she continued, her voice softening. And because I didn't give you any, now you want them, don't you? I blushed. Yeah, I kind of do, I admitted. What do you think, Bree? What's the best way to handle this? She shook her head. Matthew, I don't think it's possible. No family court is going to give you custody of two young girls. You're a single guy. It's a disaster waiting to happen in their eyes. They won't allow it. I looked at the girls, and their wide, tear-filled eyes were fixed on me. What? I asked gently. They exchanged glances, and then, as if on cue, they burst into tears. They ran to me, throwing their arms around me tightly. You wanted to keep us, Stokely sobbed, her voice trembling. I can't believe it. I never thought we'd find anyone. She couldn't finish through her tears. I held them close, their small bodies shaking as they cried. Yes, girls, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I did think about it. You need someone to look after you, and honestly, I need someone to look after me. I thought maybe we could figure this out together. The weight of their trust hit me like a ton of bricks as they clung to me. I glanced at Bree helplessly, noticing the tears streaming down her face too. She looked between the girls and me, shaking her head. "Damn it, Matthew," she muttered, her voice cracking. "Look what you've done to me. Just when I think I've got you figured out, you go and pull something like this." Her expression softened, almost like she was seeing me for the first time. "What am I going to do with you?" She sighed and rubbed her temples. "Give me a few days to think," she said finally. Then she turned to the girls. "You're coming with me. You can't stay here with Matthew. It'll ruin everything if anyone finds out. Matthew, we're taking Gary too. I can't leave him behind. He'll lose his mind without them." Before I could protest, she whisked the girls and the dog out the door like a whirlwind, bundling them into her Mercedes. "I'll call you," she said as she drove away. The next 2 weeks crawled by. She called 3 times, each conversation lasting barely 30 seconds. I missed her, and the girls, more than I cared to admit. Then, on a chilly Friday morning, Bree called and asked to meet for dinner at Alfonso's, a little Italian place in Pontiac we used to frequent. When I arrived, she was already at the bar, a small crowd of men orbiting her like moths around a flame. But the moment she spotted me, she jumped up, leaving them in the dust. We walked to our usual booth, but this time, instead of sitting across from me, she slid in beside me. That was new. We ordered, but she stayed quiet, her fingers toying with the edge of her napkin. Finally she spoke. "You know I love you, right, Matthew?" "Yes," I said, meeting her gaze. "And I love you too. I'm not talking about loving you like family or a friend," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I mean I'm in love with you, Matthew. I always have been. Ever since that day at Cedar Point. You're the only man I've ever loved, or ever will love." My heart skipped a beat as she continued. "I trust you completely. I love everything about you, except the part where we were married." She smiled faintly, but there was sadness in her eyes. "You know I need to be free. No commitments, no baggage, no ties. I love my job and my life, but I don't love them more than I love you. And the thing is, I don't have to choose. You've always understood that about me. You've always been patient. Faithful. You get me in a way no one else ever has, and that's why." She hesitated, taking a deep breath. "That's why what I'm about to say is going to sound crazy." "Ooh," I teased, trying to lighten the mood. "Sounds like I'm in for a shock." She gave me a look. "Yes, you are." Then, with a steady gaze and a trembling voice, she asked, "Will you marry me, Matthew?" I nearly choked on my wine. Let me tell you, getting wine in your lungs is not ideal. Once I managed to recover, I just sat there staring at her, my mouth hanging open. "Stop being an idiot and answer me," she snapped. "Hell no," I blurted out, finally finding my voice. "Why, Bree? We make each other miserable. In a month, we'll be at each other's throats. What's wrong with how things are now?" "Nothing," she admitted with a shrug. "But this isn't about us. It's about the sweetest, most adorable girls on the planet. Matthew, I'm completely in love with them. You wrecked my life by inviting me over that night. They're desperate to see you. Every night, they beg and cry to come back. But I'm not giving them up. I've never been happier than I am with them. No judge would give us custody, not to me, not to you, not to either of us alone. But if we were married?" She leaned in, her voice soft but insistent. "They'd give them to us in a heartbeat. I need them, Matthew. And if I need them, that means I need you. If you want them, you'll have to deal with me too. Can we do this, Matthew?" I sighed. "I doubt it," I told her honestly. "You're as bad as I am. You come home drunk, you're never on time for anything except work, and half the time, you don't even come home at all. Bree, we've been through this." "I know," she said quickly. "But what if things are different now? I can't wait to come home to them. I always call when I'm running late. And since they've been with me, I only have 1 glass of wine a night." She paused, her expression almost pleading. "I didn't even know I could feel this way. Marry me, Matthew. Give me a chance. We should talk this over," I said cautiously. "Then talk," she shot back. "What are we doing here? Do you think I'm joking? Tell me what's going on. I sighed again, signaling the waiter for more wine. All right, go ahead. Start. What drives me crazy about you, she began, is your need to control me. You have to know every detail, where I am, who I'm with, what I'm doing, when I'll be home. You're paranoid. If you could just stop trying to control me, we'd still be married. But you can't help it. You know you're the only man I've ever cared about, right? She added softly. Yeah, I do, I admitted. It used to drive me nuts. I was always worried you'd find someone else and leave me. That's never going to happen, she promised, her voice firm. I've never even considered another man since the day I met you. Sure, I go to dinners and dances with clients and colleagues, but that's just part of my job. No one has touched me, and no one ever will. Do you believe me? Yes, I said. And it's the same for me. I trust you, Bree. I know you'll never hurt me. I've always been in love with you, and I think you feel the same way. We were comfortable where we were. Well, I'm not comfortable anymore, she said, leaning closer. Those girls need a family. I love them almost as much as I love you, more than my job. And I want to be part of their lives. The only way that happens is if we do this together. Will you give me a chance, Matthew? Will you marry me so we can be a family? I'll never have kids of my own. I'm too selfish for that. But these girls? We can take care of them. Marry me, and I promise I'll make you happier than you've ever been. I sat back, staring at her. Okay, clearly you've had time to think about this, I said finally. Give me a little time too, all right? She glanced at her watch, then back at me. You've got 20 minutes, she said deadpan. Wait, what? I laughed, startled. Do I have a deadline now? I asked. Yeah? The girls are waiting outside? They'll be here in about 10 minutes, Bree said. They're taking Gary for a quick walk before the car picks us up to take us home. We quickly finished our food and stepped outside. A sleek black limo was waiting at the curb, but the girls were nowhere in sight. The driver, looking slightly annoyed, mentioned, "They're walking the dog." He didn't seem thrilled about it, probably not a fan of the idea of dog drool on the leather seats. After a few minutes, I spotted the girls hurrying toward us. Madison was holding Gary's leash tightly, her face flushed with worry. "Let's go," Madison said, her voice urgent. "Some guy was watching us, and Gary doesn't like him." He growled at him. I immediately looked down the street. Sure enough, a young guy was heading our way. He couldn't have been more than 20, with tattoos covering his arms, piercings scattered across his face, and a knit cap barely holding back messy hair. He wore a hoodie and sagging pants that clung precariously to his hips. He probably thought he looked intimidating. He didn't. "What are you staring at?" he snapped, his voice sharp and aggressive. "Nothing," I said evenly. "We were just leaving. It's all yours." I gestured to the street with a casual wave. His eyes flicked to the limo, then back to me. "Nice jacket. Fancy car. Pretty women," he sneered. "Looks like you've got some cash." This guy was nuts. I stood at least 8 inches taller than him, and outweighed him by a solid 100 pounds, and not the soft kind. "You better move along, kid," I warned, keeping my voice low and calm. "My dog really doesn't like you." He didn't take the hint. He got closer, stopping about 4 feet away. "I'm not scared of any dog," he said with a smirk. "How much cash you got on you?" I saw him reach under his jacket, and for a split second, I caught the glint of metal. That was all I needed. Madison yelped and lost her grip on Gary's leash as the dog lunged forward. Gary was on him in an instant. The guy managed to shield his face with his arm, but I heard the crunch as Gary's powerful jaws clamped down. The guy screamed in pain. "Gary, down!" I barked. Gary backed off, sitting by my side, his eyes locked on the guy who was now writhing on the ground. I knelt down next to him, Gary still alert and growling softly. "Take it, Gary," I said calmly. Gary lunged forward again, his jaws stopping just shy of the guy's neck. The sound of Gary's heavy breathing filled the air, each exhale hot against the man's skin. "I think you're an idiot," I told him, my voice steady. "What are you, some kind of—" "I'm an idiot," he blurted, panic in his voice. Good, I said. How much money do you have on you? He hesitated, and Gary's jaws pressed a little closer. Slowly, I warned. The guy fumbled with his pocket, his movements shaky. He pulled out a wad of crumpled bills and handed it to me, his hand trembling. Let him go, Gary, I commanded. Gary released him and stepped back, his dark eyes still fixed on the guy. The man groaned, clutching his broken arm as he tried to push himself up. You ever pull something like this again? I said, leaning in close. You'd better hope you don't run into me or my dog. He nodded frantically, his face pale. Without another word, he stumbled to his feet and staggered down the street, leaving the knife and his pride behind. I glanced at the girls, who were standing a few steps away, their faces a mix of fear and awe. You two okay? I asked. Madison nodded slowly. Yeah. Gary's kind of a hero, huh? Yeah, I said, ruffling Gary's fur. He's a good boy. Bree finally stepped forward, shaking her head in disbelief. What the hell just happened? Just a little street justice, I said with a shrug. Let's get out of here. We climbed into the limo, Gary settling in beside me as if nothing had happened. The girls sat close, Madison still clutching the leash tightly. As the car pulled away, I couldn't help but smile. Gary might have saved the day, but I had a feeling this wasn't the last time we'd run into trouble. Gary let the guy go, and he scrambled back, wide-eyed. I'll give you a 20-yard head start, I told him with a smirk. Then I'm sending the dog after you. Better run fast. The guy bolted like his life depended on it, but halfway down the street, his pants slipped. He stumbled, yanked them up with his good hand, and kept running. You might want to invest in a belt, I shouted after him, chuckling. Turning back to the girls, I saw their mouths hanging open in pure shock. Calmly, I kicked the guy's weapon into a storm drain. What? I asked, feigning innocence. Bree was the first to find her voice. You're one nasty son of a witch, Matthew. Note to self, never ever piss you off. The girls rushed over, throwing their arms around me. I hugged them tightly, feeling their relief. Oh my God, Matthew, Samantha whispered against my chest. I thought that guy was terrifying, but you didn't even flinch. You did it for us, didn't you? Nobody messes with my girls, I told her firmly. Then, with a sly grin, I handed her a wad of cash. And look, he even left a little something for your college fund. Samantha unfolded the bills and counted them. $700. That guy must have mugged half the town. She split it with Madison, and we all piled into the limo. As I leaned back, hugging Madison close, something caught my eye. We've got company, I muttered. A van's following us. I know, Bree replied casually. It's got some of our stuff in it. I raised an eyebrow. Stuff? She laughed. I know. I take a lot for granted. Girls, I said, sitting up straight. Yes, Matthew? I'm marrying Bree again. And you'll both be staying with us. The girls gasped, their faces lighting up. Really? Madison squealed. She's not a witch after all, Samantha teased. We love Bree. She's been amazing to us, new clothes, an incredible school. We'll make you both so proud, I swear. Bree smiled and pulled them into a hug. We know you will, sweetheart. Don't worry. Meanwhile, I sat there stunned, unable to form a single word. Matthew, you okay? Samantha asked, peering up at me. Bree chuckled. Nope. He's in full panic mode. His perfectly ordered world, it's about to get flipped upside down. His spotless house, where everything has its place. Say goodbye to that. There'll be underwear in the shower, books in the wrong spots, and coffee rings on the table. It's gonna drive him nuts. Madison laughed. I don't even know how he handles living with Gary. We'll just have to love him enough that he won't care about crumbs on the table. Think we can manage that? Bree asked. I think we can. Madison giggled. I don't know, Bree teased. But he does love pretty girls. Bat your eyelashes and he'll melt. He might be mad at me, but you too? You'll have him wrapped around your little fingers in no time. Wait a second, I groaned. I didn't exactly agree to any of this. Bree, true to form, didn't let up. She was a whirlwind, sweeping all of us along. Do you love Bree? Samantha asked, her voice soft. Yeah, I love her, I admitted. On the other side of the city. The girls burst into laughter, and I couldn't help but join in. It was ridiculous. How had I lost control of my life so quickly? What started as a small act of kindness for the girls had snowballed into this wild, chaotic plan involving marriage and adoption. When we got home, it was chaos. Movers were everywhere, carrying in boxes and furniture. To my surprise, Madison and Samantha's rooms were filling up with women's clothes. Where did all this come from? I asked Madison as she dashed by. Bree took us shopping a few times, she called back, disappearing into her room. Bree popped her head out of my bedroom, holding up a random old shirt. Matthew, do you ever throw anything away? You've still got stuff from when we were married. I'm tossing all this junk. I need space for my things. I rushed over just in time to grab my high school Letterman jacket from the pile Bree was about to toss. Stop it, Anne! I snapped, clutching the jacket. You can't just throw my stuff away. If I didn't want it, I wouldn't keep it. This is my house, and if you don't stop, I might just toss you out. Bree popped her head out of the closet, a mischievous look in her eyes. Toss me out? She repeated, smirking. Oh, really? Before I could respond, she grabbed my sleeve and dragged me into the bedroom, where clothes and boxes were scattered everywhere. Look at this place, she exclaimed, waving her hand dramatically. It's like a museum of Matthew's greatest hits. Time to clear out the junk. No way, I protested, clutching my jacket tighter. This is all important. Every bit of it. We argued back and forth for a while, Bree tossing a few things toward the donate pile and me rescuing them just as quickly. Eventually, though, she softened, rolling her eyes and muttering something about me being impossible. The next morning, I woke up late, around 10 o'clock. Groggy but determined to start the day, I stumbled into the shower, shaved, and threw on some fresh clothes. By the time I stepped out, Bree was still asleep, her fiery red hair spread across the pillow like a flame. I wandered into the living room and found Gary sprawled across a pile of my shirts, snoring softly. Seriously, Grandma? I muttered under my breath. I grabbed a glass of orange juice and a bun before giving him a nudge. Come on, let's get out of here. Gary yawned, stretched, and slowly got to his feet. We headed out into the backyard, where he took his time exploring before finally settling down at my feet. The sun was unusually warm for this time of year, and I leaned back in the glider, enjoying the peaceful moment. The quiet didn't last long. The back door creaked open, and Samantha stepped outside, holding a glass of milk and a bun. Hey there, Angel. I greeted her, waving. Hi, Matthew, she replied, smiling shyly as she closed the door behind her. She hesitated for a moment, then made her way over to the glider. Is there room for me? She asked, looking at the empty space beside me. I shifted over, patting the spot. Of course. She climbed onto the glider, curling up next to me with her feet tucked beneath her. Taking a bite of her bun, she looked up at me with those big green eyes of hers. Matthew. She started, but crumbs fell onto her lap, and she paused to brush them off. Finish your food first, I teased gently. Then we'll talk. She giggled, taking another sip of milk before starting again. Matthew, if you adopt us, does that mean you'll be our dad? And Bree will be our mom? I tilted my head, considering her question. Is that what you'd like? Oh, yes, she said, her face lighting up. Bree would be the coolest mom ever. You're not exactly cool, but you're reliable. I love you, and I think you'd be the best dad in the world. I laughed, shaking my head. Well, being reliable is better than being cool, right? She laughed along with me. I didn't mean it like that. I just mean Bree's this big, wild force of nature, and you're like a mountain. You keep everything steady. That's quite the comparison, I said with a grin. She nodded, her tone softening. She really loves you, you know. She talks about you all the time. Does she now? I asked, my curiosity piqued. Samantha nodded earnestly. Do you love her? Yes, sweetie, I admitted, my voice quiet. I love her. But like you said, she's a force of nature. Loving her is like loving a thunderstorm or a wildfire, powerful, unpredictable, and a little overwhelming at times. Well, mountains don't mind thunderstorms or wildfires, she said with a knowing smile, leaning against me. I chuckled, wrapping an arm around her. I guess they don't. Madison's more like Bree, she said thoughtfully. But I think I'm more like you. She snuggled closer, and I rested my chin lightly on her head. Maybe that's why we understand each other so well, I said. I think we could be the calm in the center of their storm, Samantha said softly, looking up at me with those big green eyes. I want you to be our dad, Matthew. I never thought we'd find someone like you and Bree. Her voice trembled slightly as she continued. We were so scared and alone. Do you think you have room in your life for girls like us? I pulled her closer, my arms wrapping around her protectively. In my heart, Samantha, there's always been a place for you and Madison, I said honestly. I've wanted to love someone like you for years, but I didn't think I'd ever get the chance. Bree never showed any interest in having kids before, but I think you two turned her world upside down, just like you did mine. Samantha smiled softly, brushing a tear away. I've seen the way she looks at us. It's like she suddenly realized how much she loves being a mom. You're right about her, she's amazing. But sometimes, she's overwhelming. She makes these decisions, and you just have to hold on for the ride. I laughed, nodding. That's always been Bree. The first time I met her, I was at an amusement park with some college friends. She decided I was going to be her ride buddy. I'd actually gone because I liked another girl, but Bree dragged me away, and we never saw the rest of the group again. We were only 20, and I fell in love with her that day. She's like a whirlwind, she sweeps into your life and takes over everything. Samantha giggled, amused by the story. What was your first fight about? You're going to think this is silly, I said, shaking my head. It was about shoes. She kept moving mine and putting hers in their place. I'd have to dig through her stuff just to find mine. She thought I was obsessive, she's probably right. But is it too much to ask that she keeps her shoes on her side of the closet? Things escalated pretty quickly. She exploded, I snapped back, and before we knew it, we were driving each other crazy. I like to have a plan, she's completely spontaneous. It's just who she is. I love that about her, but it also drives me nuts. And she'll tell you that my organized side drives her nuts too. Samantha giggled again. Madison and I fight about stuff like that all the time. She's always losing things, and then she just decides out of nowhere what we're going to do. I think we both need to change a little, Matthew. Maybe we should try to go with the flow more. But they need to change too, they need to understand that we like things in their place. Do you think we can figure this out? I asked, my voice quieter. I don't know, she admitted thoughtfully. I sighed. Bree and I never had a reason to try before. Our relationship was, well, it's complicated. I love her more now than when we were married, and I think she feels the same way. But she's not one to talk about it, she just acts. And somehow, we're closer now than we ever were back then. I loved her during our marriage, but we were always angry. Neither of us wanted to change. We were immature and selfish. Maybe you and Madison helped us realize what we were missing. I paused, looking out at the yard as the sunlight danced through the trees. The idea of being a family is exciting, but it's also terrifying. What if we screw it up? What if we lose everything? Samantha leaned her head against my chest. Maybe we just take it one step at a time. Families aren't perfect, Matthew. But I think we could figure it out together. I hugged her tighter, her words both comforting and daunting. The idea of trying, of risking everything for this chance at something real, felt both exhilarating and heavy. But as I looked at her, I knew one thing for certain, we had to try. I hate that kind of risk, I admitted. I know, Samantha replied, her voice soft but firm. But sometimes you have to take a chance. You can't get anything good in life without risking that it might go wrong. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I pulled her into a hug, and she snuggled against me like she belonged there. You're the wisest 11-year-old I've ever met, I said with a small smile. I'll be 12 next month, she replied, grinning up at me. We finished our buns and decided to take Gary for a walk. The air was crisp, and the quiet morning felt like a moment of peace before the day picked up its usual whirlwind pace. When we got back home, the others were finally awake. Bree and Madison, who were definitely not morning people, looked like groggy cats stretching and yawning after a nap. But once they'd had their showers, they were entirely different, bright-eyed and brimming with energy. Bree, ever the force of nature, immediately whisked us away to get our marriage license, file adoption papers, and handle temporary custody. Later that evening, we celebrated with a seafood dinner. The girls couldn't stop raving about the food and the prices. "Wow, Matthew. You must make a lot of money," Madison said, wide-eyed. I chuckled, shaking my head. "I make about $90,000 a year, which is plenty to take care of us." "But Bree," I said, gesturing to her, "she earns 10 times that." Their jaws dropped as they stared at Bree, who laughed it off with a wave of her hand. "It's just money," she said. "The point is, we can treat you girls whenever you want. And honestly, Matthew's cooking beats most restaurants anyway." "You cook?" Madison asked, her curiosity piqued. Bree nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, but simple things. Anyone can follow a recipe." "But Matthew? He's a genius in the kitchen." "She's pretty good too," I added, grinning. If only she could stay focused. Bree swatted my arm playfully. "Make one mistake, and he'll never let it go," she joked, laughing. "Not one mistake," I corrected, smiling wider. "In our first year, she burned food so badly, not even Gary would eat it. She'd take it outside and leave it under a tree like some kind of burned offering." Everyone burst out laughing, and Bree, in an unusually good mood, snuggled up to me while the girls giggled. "We've never eaten anywhere this nice," Madison said shyly. Bree gave her a serious look. "Madison, say that again with confidence." Madison straightened her back, smiled, and repeated herself, this time with pride. Bree grinned. "See? We may be from Detroit, but we've got class." The girls beamed, clearly proud. Over time, Bree had taught them everything: how to dress, how to walk, how to speak and carry themselves. In just 6 months they'd gone from street smart to sophisticated, excelling in everything they did. That night, after we got home, Bree was unusually excited. She told the girls, "Turn on the TV and leave it on all night." They laughed knowingly, already familiar with her dramatic flair. Then she grabbed my hand and led me to the bedroom. "We're celebrating tonight," she said with a mischievous smile. "What are we celebrating?" I asked, amused but curious. "The start of something incredible," she whispered, her voice filled with warmth and affection. "I love you, Matthew, and I'll remind you of that every day. You and I? We're building something amazing together." Her fiery red hair fell in waves as she let it loose, a rare sight that always left me speechless. As she smiled at me, her confidence and love radiated in a way that made me feel like the luckiest man alive. I asked, my voice thick with anticipation. Bree stepped closer, her movements smooth and deliberate, her presence enveloping me. She gently guided me to the bed, sitting beside me with an expression that spoke volumes. "I need you to hear me out," she said, her tone soft but determined. "This isn't easy for me to say, but I've spent so much time being scared, of failure, of love, of being something I wasn't sure I could handle. But you make me feel like I can be more." I sat up, meeting her gaze. "You've always been more, Bree. You just never gave yourself enough credit." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "Do you want me, Matthew? All of me, friend, wife, partner, and maybe even a mother to the girls? I know I've been selfish in the past. I never gave myself fully to anyone because I was too afraid. But I'm ready now. Will you help me? Be patient with me? I promise you'll never regret it." I reached for her hand, pulling her closer. "I love you more than anything. Of course I'll help you, but you'll need to be patient with me too. We're a team now, forever. We'll figure it all out together." Her voice wavered as she confessed. "I'm scared I'll mess up. I've always thought I'd be a terrible mom. That's why I never wanted kids." I laughed softly, resting my forehead against hers. "I don't know how to be a dad either, but I think we'll be okay. We've got each other, and we've got the girls. They're already teaching us more than we ever expected." She let out a small laugh, her tension easing. And being a wife again? I've made so many mistakes, Matthew. We both have, I said, my voice firm. But we're not the same people we were back then. We've grown, Bree. We've learned. And this time, we're going to get it right. She leaned into me, her arms wrapping tightly around my shoulders. I believe you. I believe in us. Eventually, we fell asleep, tangled together in a quiet promise to each other and to the future we were about to build. Underscore 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 underscore. The next morning, we showered together, laughing and teasing as the weight of the previous night gave way to a light-hearted sense of renewal. Bree emerged glowing, slipping into her favorite pajamas with an unmistakable air of mischief. What's going on? I asked, eyeing her with suspicion. She grinned slyly. We've got guests coming. Before I could press further, a knock sounded at the door, and Samantha burst in, followed closely by Madison and the ever-enthusiastic Gary. The next half-hour dissolved into chaos, as we played an impromptu game of wrestling with the dog claiming victory, of course. After breakfast, Bree announced with an air of mystery. We've got an appointment. I raised an eyebrow. Where? You'll see, she said, her grin widening. We piled into the car, the girls buzzing with excitement as I remained in the dark. When we pulled up to the courthouse, a flicker of understanding dawned, but before I could say anything, Bree led me inside. In the quiet of the courthouse hall, she knelt before me, pulling a small box from her purse. My heart froze as she opened it, revealing our old wedding rings along with her engagement ring. Matthew, she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Will you marry me again? This time, it's forever. I never stopped loving you, and I don't want to waste another second pretending I can live without you. Samantha and Madison jumped in with eager grins. Say yes, Matthew. Please. I stared at Bree, my heart racing. And, are you absolutely sure? Her eyes met mine with unwavering confidence. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I smiled, unable to hold back my own emotions. Yes, Bree. 1,000,000 times yes. The girls cheered, and as Bree slipped the ring onto my finger once more, I felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by the promise of a new future, a family, a partnership, and a love stronger than ever before. They begged me. We want to be a family. We love you and Bree. How could I resist? 10 minutes later, we were married again, standing in the courthouse with Samantha and Madison grinning ear to ear. To celebrate, Bree took us to a new Greek restaurant. As I sat there, surrounded by the people I loved most in the world, I felt my life unfolding in a way I'd never imagined. The most incredible woman was my wife again, and now I had 2 amazing daughters who were growing up fast. Their happiness was infectious, filling me with a joy I hadn't known before. Could we make this work? Only time would tell. It took a month to finalize custody of the girls. Bree worked tirelessly to get everything sorted, and when the day finally came, the girls were ecstatic. So were we. Bree sold her apartment and moved in with me, a change that I worried might lead to friction. But to my surprise, it went smoother than I'd expected. A few weeks after the wedding, we hit a small bump. Bree forgot to call us after dinner with a client. When she came home late, we were all waiting in the living room. Samantha held up the phone like a silent reminder. Bree froze, realization dawning on her face. Without a word, she dropped to her knees and burst into tears. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I forgot to call. I'll do my best not to let it happen again. Her apology was a turning point. Bree rarely apologized, so this showed real growth. Samantha hugged her first, then Madison, and finally, I joined them. It's okay. We understand, I said gently. From that moment, we all worked harder to keep each other happy. The girls were great at helping Bree and me adjust to our new roles as parents, and our small disagreements never overshadowed the contentment we felt as a family. Bree enrolled the girls in the private school where I taught, and we grew closer during our daily rides together. They filled my life with energy, sharing their thoughts, dreams, and worries on those drives. After school, they tackled their homework, and then we'd take Gary for a walk before dinner. Dinner was usually at 5 o'clock, with Bree joining us around 6:30. If she was running late, she'd call, and we'd go out instead. The balance we found made me realize how much we had grown as a family. When Madison turned 16, she had only one request: her driver's license. She studied hard and passed on her first try. The night before her birthday, Bree brought up an idea while we were lying in bed. "I want to buy Madison a car," she said casually, though the gleam in her eye hinted she'd been planning this for a while. "Okay, what kind of car?" I asked, curious. "A new Camaro convertible," she said with a mischievous smile. "How much will that cost?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Matthew, does it really matter?" she replied, rolling her eyes. "Do you think we're going broke?" "No," I said with a chuckle. "I just like to know these things." She smiled and kissed me. "I think it'll be about $60,000. I let out a low whistle. "That's a lot for a car." "She deserves it," Bree said softly. "She does," I agreed. We ordered the car, a bright yellow Camaro with black stripes and a sleek black interior. Bree insisted on the big V8 engine, saying it would hold its value better. Though I had some reservations, I trusted her judgment. When the car arrived, we parked it in the garage and waited for Madison's birthday morning. The next day, as usual, the girls grabbed their bags and followed me to the car for school. Bree was already in the garage, but I hadn't unlocked the car doors. "Dad let us in," Samantha said, sounding confused. "You're not riding with me today," I said with a grin. I said teasingly, "Madison, you're driving." Madison looked puzzled, her brows furrowing. "Mom's not going to work?" she asked, still not catching on. "No," I replied, motioning toward the garage. "She's leaving, but not in my car." Madison looked even more confused. "What are you going to drive?" I smiled and pressed the garage door opener. As the door slowly lifted, the bright yellow Camaro came into view. Her big green eyes widened, and she froze, staring at the car in disbelief. For a moment, neither she nor Samantha said a word. Then, suddenly, Madison started crying, tears streaming down her face as she trembled, unable to speak. I quickly jumped out of the car while Bree rushed to her side, wrapping her arms around Madison. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked, my heart sinking. "We thought you'd be happy. This is your car. It's for your birthday." Madison buried her face in Bree's chest, crying too hard to respond. Samantha joined in, hugging her sister tightly. We stood there, holding Madison until she could catch her breath. Finally, Madison whispered, "I don't need a car. I just love you both so much. This is too much. Samantha and I already talked about it. We don't need anything. We just need you to love us." I kissed her tear-streaked cheek. "We love you so much, Madison," I said softly. Bree's voice trembled as she added, "We love you both more than anything in the world. Having you in our lives is a dream come true. Giving you things makes us happy because it shows how much we love you." Now Samantha was crying too. I pulled them both into a hug and said gently, "Come on, let's at least go check out the car." They wiped their tears as we led them into the garage. I opened the driver's door for Madison, while Bree opened the passenger side for Samantha. Madison placed her hands on the steering wheel, her smile shining through the lingering tears. "It suits you," I told her, my voice soft with pride. "Go ahead, start it up." Madison turned the key, and the V8 engine roared to life. Both girls giggled through their tears, the excitement finally taking over. I knocked on the window, and Madison rolled it down. I leaned in, kissed her forehead, and said, "See you at school." She drove out of the garage, stopping just outside the driveway. Then, in a flash, she jumped out of the car and ran back to us, throwing herself into our arms. "I love you so much!" she cried, kissing us both over and over. "Thank you. You're the best mom and dad ever." She ran back to the Camaro, and the girls drove off, the engine rumbling as they disappeared down the street. I turned to Bree, and she was crying too. Somehow, I realized I had tears running down my face as well. "Look at us," I said, laughing through the tears. "You'd think we were the ones turning 16. I hugged her tightly. It was a great idea, Bree. You're incredible. For Samantha's 16th birthday, we did the same thing. Though it wasn't as emotional as Madison's, it was still a moment we'd never forget. The girls were growing up fast. Over the years, we took them on trips to Hawaii, celebrated their achievements, and watched them transform into remarkable young women. By the time Madison graduated from high school, she was already deep into her college studies. The day Samantha left for college, I came home to find Bree sitting on the couch, her face buried in her hands. I sat beside her, wrapping my arms around her silently. We stayed that way for a while, just holding each other. Finally, Bree looked up, her blue eyes glistening with tears. "Our kids are grown up, Matthew," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I know," I replied, kissing her forehead. "That's what kids do." She cupped my face in her hands, staring into my eyes with a vulnerability I rarely saw. "Let's have another one, Matthew," she said, her voice trembling. "This time, just you and me. I want a baby." Tears streamed down her face as she continued. "I never thought I'd want this. I love you so much, and I already miss them so much. I want to do it again. It was so amazing, Matthew. They're only 60 miles away," I said, holding her close. "I know," she whispered, "but I still miss them." "I miss them too, kitten," I said, brushing her hair back. "Maybe we should start practicing, if we're serious about this baby." Bree gasped, her wide eyes searching mine. "Really? You mean it? You want a baby?" "Of course," I said, smiling. "I hope it's a red-haired girl, just like you. I love you with all my heart, Bree." I scooped her into my arms and carried her through the quiet, empty house to our bedroom, ready to start the next chapter of our lives. Gary had to be kicked out of the room, but that didn't matter. We were building something new, something beautiful. As I drifted off to sleep, my eyes landed on the picture of Madison and Samantha on the nightstand. They didn't look like strangers anymore. They looked like family,